You won't believe what happened when Sarah, just an ordinary woman like you and me, made a simple choice to help a stranger. It was one of those days when nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and life was moving along as usual. But sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, life surprises us in ways we could never imagine. Today's story is about kindness, mystery, and a moment that changed everything. Before we dive deep, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends, because stories like these remind us of the power of a single act of kindness. Sarah had always believed in helping others, no matter how small the gesture. She wasn't rich or famous. She wasn't someone who could change the world all at once. But she knew that even a little kindness could go a long way. That morning, Sarah decided to take a walk through the park near her apartment. The park was usually quiet, filled with people jogging, walking their dogs, or sitting quietly on benches. But as she passed the main pathway, her eyes caught sight of a man sitting alone on a worn-out bench. He looked tired, worn, and hopeless. His clothes were old and torn, and he had the kind of face that told 1,000 stories of hardship. Sarah recognized him as one of the many homeless people who often stayed around the park. Normally, people would walk past without even looking, but something about this man made Sarah pause. His eyes held a sadness, but also a quiet dignity, like he had been through much but hadn't given up completely. She hesitated for a moment, then approached him gently. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "Do you need any help?" The man looked up slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm okay," he said quietly. "Just trying to get through the day." Sarah smiled warmly. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Sometimes a phone call can help more than you think." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "If you want, you can use my phone to make a call." The man looked surprised. "You'd really let me use your phone?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "Everyone deserves a chance." His name was James. He hesitated for a moment before taking the phone, his hands trembling slightly. Sarah stood nearby, watching quietly, her heart full of hope that this small act could brighten his day. As James dialed a number, Sarah could barely hear the conversation, but one thing was clear. His voice changed. The hopelessness faded, replaced by something else: urgency, desperation, and then shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. James was speaking to someone important, someone he hadn't heard from in years. The words made Sarah's heart race, and she was frozen in place, listening closely. After the call ended, James looked at Sarah with tears in his eyes. "I didn't expect to get through," he whispered. "I thought it was too late." Sarah's curiosity was piqued. She wanted to know more about his story, but she also understood that some things are better shared slowly. "Thank you for trusting me," she said softly. "If you want, we can talk. I'd like to hear your story." James nodded slowly. "I'd like that." And just like that, a simple act of kindness turned into something neither of them expected. Now, I don't want to spoil the entire story right away, but trust me when I say, what happened next will leave you speechless. So stay tuned, because in the coming parts, you'll learn everything about James, his past, his struggles, and the surprising twists that changed his life forever. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends and family. Stories like this remind us all why kindness matters, and together we can make the world a little better, one story at a time. Sarah invited James to sit on a nearby bench where the sunlight gently warmed their faces. They began to talk, slowly, peeling back the layers of his life. James told her that he wasn't always homeless. Once he had a good job, a home, and a family he loved deeply. But life had a way of twisting things unexpectedly. He had lost his job when the factory he worked at closed down suddenly. With no income, his wife left him, taking their children with her. He spiraled into depression and made mistakes he regretted. Eventually, He found himself living on the streets, feeling invisible to the world around him. Sarah listened carefully, her heart aching for the man sitting before her. She asked gently, "Do you have anyone left? Family or friends who can help?" James shook his head. "No one I can turn to now." But something about James's story wasn't just sadness. It was resilience. Despite everything, he hadn't lost hope completely. He wanted a second chance, but he didn't know how to find it. Sarah decided then and there to help James however she could. She promised to stand by him and help him reconnect with the people he'd lost. But first, she wanted to understand more about the phone call. "Who did you call just now?" she asked. James hesitated but then said, "I called an old friend. Someone I thought I'd never hear from again. I'm not sure if she even remembers me." That sparked more questions in Sarah's mind. Who was this friend? And why was this call so important? As they talked, more about James's life came to light. His dreams, his regrets, and his hope for redemption. Sarah realized that this was more than just a story about a homeless man. It was about the human spirit and the power of connection. Throughout the day, Sarah and James shared stories, laughter, and even tears. People passed by, some curious, others indifferent, but Sarah didn't care. She was determined to help James find his way back. By the time the sun began to set, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. She encouraged James to keep hope alive and promised to help him take the next steps. Before we end this part, I want to remind you again, if this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible stories, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still exists. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into James's past and learn about the people he left behind and how one phone call could change everything. When Sarah said goodbye to James that evening, she felt a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. She knew that this was just the start of a journey, one that neither of them could predict. James's phone call had opened a door, but whether it would lead to light or more shadows remained to be seen. The next morning, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about James and his mysterious friend. Who was she? What connection did they share that could change James's life? She reached out to some local shelters and charities to find ways to support James. She wanted to help him get back on his feet, but she also knew the real key was in that one phone call. Meanwhile, James sat on the cold pavement of a nearby bus stop, waiting for a bus that could take him somewhere new. After the phone call the day before, he felt a strange sense of hope mixed with fear. He didn't know if reconnecting with his past would bring salvation or heartbreak, but something inside told him he had to try. James's story was far from ordinary. Years ago, before he lost everything, he was a hard-working man with dreams of building a better future for his family. He worked at a local factory, fixing machines and making sure everything ran smoothly. He took pride in his work, believing that one day he'd save enough to buy a small home for his wife and children. His wife, Maria, was the light of his life. She was kind, caring, and always supported his dreams. Together they dreamed of a happy life filled with laughter and security. But fate had different plans. The factory where James worked suddenly shut down. The company moved overseas, leaving hundreds jobless overnight. James tried to find another job, but the market was tough and his skills were outdated. Months turned into years, and the bills piled up. Maria's patience wore thin, and the strain on their marriage grew unbearable. One bitter winter night, after a fierce argument, Maria left with their children. James was left alone in a cold apartment that echoed with silence. He tried to stay strong, but without his family and job, the walls closed in on him. Gradually, he lost hope and ended up living on the streets. But James never stopped thinking about Maria and their children. He wondered where they were, if they were safe, and if they remembered him. His heart ached with regret and longing. Back at the park, Sarah made calls and visited local organizations, trying to find any information about James's family. She wanted to reunite them if possible, But it was a difficult path. Homelessness and lost connections are complicated, tangled webs that aren't easy to unravel. Then one afternoon, James's phone rang again. It was the number he had called the day before. Sarah was with him when he answered. It was Maria. Her voice was hesitant, soft, and full of emotion. "James, is that really you?" she asked. "Yes, Maria, it's me," he replied, tears welling up in his eyes. They talked for hours that day, sharing stories of the past years, the pain, and the mistakes. Maria revealed that after leaving James, she had struggled to raise their children alone. Life had been harsh, but she never stopped hoping to hear from him again. Maria explained that she had recently moved to a new city, working 2 jobs to keep the family afloat. The children were now teenagers, but they often asked about their father. Hearing James's voice brought a flood of emotions she hadn't expected. Sarah watched as James's face changed from worry to joy. This phone call was more than just words. It was the bridge between broken hearts and new beginnings. However, reconnecting was just the first step. Both James and Maria knew that healing years of pain wouldn't happen overnight. They needed to take things slow, rebuild trust, and find a way to come together again. Sarah promised to help with whatever they needed. She helped James find temporary shelter and arranged for him to meet a counselor who specialized in family reunification. It wasn't going to be easy, but Sarah believed in the power of second chances. Meanwhile, James started taking small steps to improve his life. He attended job training programs, learned new skills, and tried to stay positive despite setbacks. Each day was a battle, but he kept Maria and the children in his heart as motivation. One afternoon, while walking through the city, James found an old photo on the ground. It was a picture of him and Maria, smiling with their children. Holding that photo, James felt a surge of determination. He wasn't going to give up. As weeks passed, Maria and James exchanged more calls and messages. They shared memories, hopes, and even regrets. Slowly, they began to heal the wounds that time had left behind. One day, Maria surprised James by inviting him to meet their children. The thought terrified and thrilled James. He wasn't sure how their children would react or if they would accept him after all these years. But Sarah encouraged him. "This is your chance to make things right," she said. The day of the meeting arrived. James waited nervously at a small cafe. When Maria arrived with their 2 children, James felt his heart pounding. The children looked curious but cautious. The moment was filled with silent questions and unspoken emotions. But as they talked, laughed, and shared stories, the walls between them began to crumble. Tears flowed and hugs were exchanged. It was the start of a new chapter, fragile, but full of hope. James realized that while he couldn't change the past, he could build a better future, and for the first time in years he felt alive. Sarah's kindness had sparked a miracle, a chance for a broken family to reunite and heal. Before we end this part, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with others. Stories like James's remind us that no matter how hard life gets, kindness and hope can change everything. In the next part, we'll follow James's journey as he faces new challenges, fights for stability, and discovers the true meaning of family. James had finally taken the first big step. He had met his children. The moment was both beautiful and heartbreaking, filled with emotions that no words could fully capture. For the first time in years, James felt like he had a real chance to rebuild his family, but he knew the road ahead would be long and full of challenges. Reuniting with Maria and the kids brought joy, but also exposed wounds that had not yet healed. James noticed how his children, now teenagers, held back at times, unsure whether to trust the man who had disappeared from their lives. Maria, too, had mixed feelings, relief that James was back, but also fear of being hurt again. Despite the struggles, James was determined to do whatever it took. He wanted to prove to them, and most importantly to himself, that he could be the father and husband they deserved. James started by focusing on small things, helping with homework, attending school events, and simply spending time with his children. At first, the conversations were awkward, but gradually they grew warmer. The children began to open up about their lives, their hopes, and even their frustrations about the years without him. Maria and James began attending counseling sessions together. These meetings were intense and emotional. They talked about the past, the pain of separation, and the mistakes made. Forgiveness wasn't easy for either of them, but they both knew that healing was impossible without it. James took every opportunity to show his commitment. He found a part-time job cleaning offices at night, which was exhausting, but it allowed him to contribute financially. His goal was clear: to save enough to rent a small place where they could all live together again. Sarah, who had been a constant support, helped connect James with a local community center offering job training and financial counseling. James enrolled in courses to update his skills. He wanted to get a stable job, one that would give his family security. Despite his hard work, James faced many setbacks. Employers were hesitant to hire someone with a recent gap in employment and no current address. Some days he left interviews feeling defeated, wondering if he would ever find a stable footing. But every time doubt crept in, James reminded himself of his family waiting for him. The image of his children's faces, hopeful yet cautious, pushed him forward. One evening, after a long day at the community center, James returned to the shelter where he was staying temporarily. The shelter was crowded, noisy, and far from home, but it was a roof over his head. As he lay on the thin mattress, his mind drifted to the future. He dreamed of a small house with a yard where his children could play safely. He imagined Maria cooking in the kitchen and laughter filling the rooms. These dreams became his motivation. No matter how tough the present, the future was worth fighting for. Meanwhile, Maria juggled 2 jobs and parenting alone. She worried about James, about whether this reunion would last. She remembered the promises made years ago and wondered if they were realistic now. Their children, Sarah and Michael, were at very different stages in their lives. Sarah, 16, was rebellious and guarded, struggling to trust her father. Michael, 14, was quieter but carried his own pain from years without a dad. James understood that earning their trust would take time. He listened more than he spoke, giving them space to express themselves. Slowly, small moments of connection started to build bridges. One afternoon, James took Sarah and Michael to the park. They played soccer, laughed, and shared snacks. For a few hours, they were just a family. No past mistakes, no regrets, just presence. That day, James realized that healing wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up consistently. It was about being there for the everyday moments. As weeks turned into months, James's efforts began to bear fruit. He landed a stable job at a warehouse, working long hours but earning enough to rent a modest apartment. Maria found a better job closer to home, which gave her more time with the children. The family moved into the small apartment together. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. For James, that moment was a milestone, proof that change was possible. However, challenges didn't end there. The neighborhood was rough, and the apartment building was old and noisy. Money was tight, and tensions sometimes flared. Old wounds would occasionally resurface in arguments, but through it all, the family held on to their commitment to rebuild. Sarah, who had been distant, began confiding in her father. She shared stories from school, her dreams of becoming an artist, and her fears about the future. Michael, too, opened up about his love for basketball and his hopes for college. James felt proud but knew the road ahead was still long. He wanted to provide more stability and opportunities for his children. Education was a priority, and he encouraged both kids to focus on their studies. Maria and James continued couples counseling, which helped them navigate the complexities of their renewed relationship. They learned to communicate better, to be patient, and to forgive. One evening after dinner, James sat with his family and shared the story of his past struggles openly. He didn't shy away from the mistakes or hardships. Instead, he used his story to inspire his children, to show that no matter how low you fall, it's possible to rise again. The kids listened quietly, absorbing their father's honesty and vulnerability. That night, James felt a deep sense of peace. He was no longer just a homeless man on the streets. He was a father, a husband, and a man determined to make a difference. Yet the story was far from over. One day, Sarah came home, excited. She had received a scholarship offer from a local art school. It was a dream come true. James and Maria were overjoyed, seeing this as a sign that their sacrifices were paying off. Michael, inspired by his father's perseverance, joined a youth basketball league and was working hard to earn a spot on the school team. James found himself balancing work, family, and personal growth. He still faced financial challenges, but now he had hope and a support system. Through it all, Sarah and Michael's relationship with their father deepened. They began to understand the man behind the hardships, a man who loved them fiercely and was willing to fight for their future. James also reconnected with old friends and community members who offered encouragement and help. Slowly, the stigma of homelessness faded as he rebuilt his identity. The community center that once felt like a small step now became a hub of opportunities. James volunteered there on weekends, sharing his story to inspire others facing similar struggles. He became a symbol of hope, proof that kindness, determination, and family can overcome even the darkest times. As the year came to an end, James reflected on the journey. From the cold streets to a warm home, from loneliness to love, he had come a long way. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he no longer walked it alone, and just when things seemed to settle, a new surprise awaited, one that would change everything once again. But that, my friends, is a story for the next part. Before we continue, please remember to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories of hope and inspiration. James had been steadily rebuilding his life. From the cold nights on the street to the warmth of a small home filled with family, he had come a long way. His children were thriving, Maria was hopeful, and he himself felt stronger than he had in years. But just when things seemed to be settling into a new normal, life had a way of surprising him in the most unexpected ways. One chilly morning, as James prepared to leave for work, he noticed an envelope slipped under the apartment door. It was plain, unmarked, and didn't have a return address. His heart raced as he picked it up and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten with neat, careful script. It began with a simple greeting. Dear James. For a moment he was frozen. The letter was from someone he hadn't heard from in years, someone who held a key to his past. The words that followed filled him with both hope and anxiety. The writer spoke about forgiveness, understanding, and a chance to start over, but there was also a request, a secret that James had kept hidden for too long. As he read the letter, memories flooded back. The past he had tried to bury was suddenly knocking on his door again. James's mind raced. Could he face what had been left unresolved? Was he ready to confront the people and the mistakes that had driven him away? The letter ended with an invitation. A meeting, a chance to talk face to face. James shared the letter with Maria and the children. Their reactions were mixed. Maria worried it might open old wounds, while the kids were curious and supportive. Together, they decided that James should go. This was an opportunity to finally close a painful chapter and move forward with a clean slate. The day of the meeting arrived. James felt nervous, yet determined. He dressed carefully, took a deep breath, and stepped out. At the designated cafe, he saw a familiar face, an old friend from before his struggles had begun. The friend greeted him warmly, but with a seriousness that told James this conversation would not be easy. They talked for hours. The friend revealed truths James had long avoided, about missed opportunities, broken promises, and the ripple effects of his absence on those who cared for him. Hearing these words was painful, but also strangely freeing. For the first time, James understood that to truly heal, He needed to face the past honestly, without excuses. After the meeting, James felt lighter. He realized forgiveness had to start with himself. He could not change the past, but he could shape the future. Back at home, this newfound clarity changed how James approached everything. He became more patient with Maria and the children, more open about his feelings and fears. His relationship with Sarah and Michael blossomed further. They saw a man who was not perfect, but who was trying his best. And that meant everything. One day, Maria surprised James with tickets to a local community event, a fundraiser to help families struggling with homelessness. She knew how close that struggle was to James's heart, and she wanted him to see how far he had come. At the event, James was invited to share his story. Standing before a crowd, speaking about his journey from despair to hope, he found a new purpose. The applause was overwhelming, but more than that, James felt connected to the community, to the people who had supported him, and to himself. The months passed. James continued to grow. He took night classes to improve his skills, hoping to eventually move into a better job. Maria's career also advanced, giving the family more stability. Sarah's art flourished, and Michael's basketball skills earned him a spot on the school team. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Money was still tight, and tensions flared in moments of stress. But the family had learned to face problems together, with love and patience. One evening, as James tucked his children into bed, he thought about the journey they had traveled, from hardship to hope, from separation to reunion. He realized that the true strength of family was not in perfection, but in the willingness to forgive, to try again, and to love unconditionally. Just when James believed the worst was behind him, life threw another curveball, a test of his faith and resilience unlike anything he had faced before. But for now, he was ready. Before we move to the next part, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that inspire and uplift. James's life had finally begun to settle into a rhythm he could almost call normal. The past's heavy shadows no longer loomed over him every waking moment. His children laughed again. Maria's smile was brighter, and the little apartment felt like a true home. But just as the family was starting to breathe easier, fate had something unexpected in store for them, a challenge so big it threatened to undo everything James had fought so hard to build. It all started on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. James was at work when his phone buzzed urgently. It was Maria, and the panic in her voice was unmistakable. "James, you need to come home. Now, it's urgent." His heart sank. He rushed home, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When he arrived, Maria was waiting outside the apartment with the kids. Her eyes were red, and her hands trembled slightly. "James," she said, "there's been an accident. Michael, he's been hurt." James's world spun. Michael, his strong, lively boy. How could this happen? Maria explained between sobs that Michael had been playing basketball at school when he suddenly collapsed. The coach and staff called an ambulance. Immediately, James grabbed the kids, trying to stay calm, but inside, panic took over. At the hospital, hours felt like days. The doctors ran test after test, searching for the cause. Michael was stable, but unconscious. The family waited in agonizing silence, hoping for a miracle. Finally, the doctor approached James and Maria. He explained that Michael had a rare heart condition, one that could have caused his collapse. It was serious, and surgery might be necessary. James's mind reeled. The cost of the operation was astronomical, far beyond what they could afford, but they couldn't give up. Not now. Not after all they had been through. James's thoughts turned to the community event where he had shared his story. Maybe people would help. Maybe there was hope. He reached out to the community, friends, neighbors, anyone who would listen. Donations started coming in, messages of support flooded his phone. Maria and James felt overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers and friends. While they waited for Michael's surgery date, James took to working extra shifts. He didn't want to be away from the family, but he knew he had to do whatever it took. During those long nights, he thought about how far they had come, from a homeless man with nothing to a father fighting to save his son's life. One night, as James sat by Michael's bedside, the boy stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and he smiled weakly at his father. James squeezed his hand, tears streaming down his face. This small moment gave him the strength to keep going. The surgery was scheduled, and the day arrived with nervous hope. James and Maria prayed, held each other, and waited. Hours later, the surgeon emerged with news. The operation was a success. Relief washed over them, but the journey wasn't over. Michael needed time to heal, and the family needed to stay strong. Through this trial, James learned the true meaning of resilience, how to hold on when everything seems lost. The community continued to support them. Volunteers brought meals, neighbors checked in, and friends sent encouraging messages. James realized that his story wasn't just about hardship. It was about the power of kindness, the strength found in unity. Slowly, Michael regained his strength. The sparkle returned to his eyes, and the laughter came back to the house. This chapter of their lives taught James and Maria that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. As Michael prepared to return to school, the family celebrated together. They knew challenges would come again, but they also knew they could face anything, as long as they were together. And through it all, James never forgot the promise he made to himself, to always be there for his family, no matter what. Before we continue to the final part of this incredible journey, please like this video if you're inspired by James's story. Share it with friends who need hope and subscribe for more stories of courage and heart. The sun was setting over the quiet neighborhood, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Inside the little house, laughter filled the air once again. Michael was back home, healthy and full of energy, the light in his eyes brighter than ever. The long nightmare was over, and James's family was finally free to dream about the future. But James knew deep down that their story was not just about survival. It was about transformation, about how kindness, courage, and unwavering faith could change lives in ways they never imagined. After the surgery, life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Michael went back to school, his friends welcoming him with open arms. Maria found work as a caregiver, her gentle spirit touching the lives of those she helped. James, fueled by a new sense of purpose, decided to give back to the community that had lifted him up when he was down. He started volunteering at the local shelter, sharing his story with others who were struggling. His journey from homelessness to hope inspired many. But James wanted to do more. He dreamed of creating a place where people could find not only shelter but also dignity, support, and a fresh start. Slowly, with the help of donations and volunteers, James began turning that dream into reality. The neighborhood rallied behind him, contributing time, resources, and love. What started as a simple idea blossomed into a community center, a beacon of hope for many who, like James, had known hardship. The center offered food, counseling, job training, and after-school programs for children. It became a place where broken lives were mended and new beginnings were possible. James often thought back to the day he let a homeless man use his phone, never imagining how that moment of compassion would ripple through his life and beyond. That small act had set off a chain of kindness, connecting people in ways they could never have predicted. Through every challenge, James and his family held on to one truth. No matter how dark the night, the dawn would come, and when it did, they would be ready to shine. James's story caught the attention of local news and even national media. His message resonated with people everywhere, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could lead to the greatest transformations. With newfound recognition, James was invited to speak at events and schools, encouraging others to believe in the power of generosity and community. Each time he shared his story, he saw hope spark in the eyes of listeners, just like it had in his own heart years ago. Maria watched her husband with pride, knowing that together they had turned their greatest struggles into something beautiful. Their children, too, learned the value of kindness and perseverance, carrying those lessons into their own futures. One day, as James stood outside the community center, watching children play and neighbors greet one another with smiles, he felt a deep sense of peace. This was more than a building or a project. It was a family, a movement, a legacy, and it all began with a simple, selfless act: letting a homeless man use a phone. Before we close this incredible journey, I want to remind you to please like this video if James's story touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories just like this. Thank you for staying with us through every part of this amazing tale. Remember, kindness has the power to change the world, one life at a time.